Hi, and welcome to this episode of From the Syllabus. I'm Lee Hall, an Associate Professor of Literacy Studies at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And in today's episode, I am going to be talking to you about how I revised Twitter chats with my class and what I experienced in doing so. All right, so if you've watched the previous video, if you haven't watched a previous video, I suggest you start with that because it'll give you a nice overview of where I started in my thinking in terms of having Twitter chats. But I did this with an undergraduate class. And what you see here are the directions that I gave them. These are revised directions. Some things are still the same as before. So I still bound when the Twitter chat's going to happen. I give them a day. It's going to start on Monday. This one happened to be on February 29th. Starts at 8 a.m. and it's going to end the following Monday, March 7th at 8 a.m., right? So any tweeting that students do that gets counted towards a grade for them has to happen in that time frame. So I tell them I'm going to release on just 3 questions, right? The 29th, the 2nd, and the 5th, okay? I'm going to release one question at 8 a.m. In my previous Twitter chat, I released a question every day. And remember I told you can use Twuffer, twuffer.com to schedule all the tweets at once. And so you don't have to get up and do this at a particular time. You can sit down one day and schedule it. So I did that again. But this time, what I'm really focused on is I'm trying to actually get students to have a discussion with each other using Twitter between classes. So I'm not tweeting questions every day. I'm just tweeting questions 3 days because I want us to really stay in that discussion a little bit longer. I don't want to be changing up the questions quite as frequently. All right, and of course I number the questions, Q1, Q2, and Q3, and I tell students you can respond to or ignore any question, right? So you could spend the entire week talking about question 1 or question 3 and not any of the others, right? Or you could talk about all 3. It doesn't matter to me. Pick something that interests you and talk about it. Okay, now I ask students to do 2 things. I did this before, and I found it worked well, so I kept it, did it again. When they respond, we have a hashtag, and so this time it is the course number followed by chat. So if my course number was ABC123, then when you put in your response, you'd have to do hashtag ABC123 chat. And what that allowed me to do, right, was to very easily type in the course number followed by chat and bring everything up at once, right? And then I also told students that they need to tweet with A1 if they're responding to question 1, A2 if responding to question 2, etc. That just sort of helps me and everybody else orient ourselves to what we're talking about. All right, and so obviously if you're tweeting, but you're not, particularly if you're not using the course hashtag with the chats, then you're not getting credit. Okay, so you have to use ABC123 chat to be recognized as participating in the Twitter chat. Okay, so this is what I told students in terms of how should you respond to these questions. I don't want them to just simply log in and post tweets. That was the issue I had before, right? Of course, before I was counting, I was saying you have to have, X number of tweets per day to get this many points. And so what I found that led to was people go in and they post like 3, 4, 5 tweets in a row and then they're out. So this time I'm saying, hey, let's think about this as a conversation around an issue. And while, yes, you're going to be posting tweets and information and retweeting stuff, that's part of this. That should not be the bulk of what we're doing, okay? As you see in number 3, I told them they need to talk to each other. I reminded them to call the person out when they're talking to them. I told them to make a question, make a statement, whatever they wanted to direct their attention to. These directions are sparse, right? I'm just trying to give students enough of a framework to be able to function and do well. I'm not trying to micromanage their responses, and I think that's very critical. I might have been a little too micromanagey in the previous video in terms of how I thought about grading. That's just a function of experience and trying to figure out what works. So I backed off on that in this. Here's how I did grading. Now remember, I've gamified my classroom. I give students experience points. You do it however you want, right? So what I say is, first of all, just to get on the map and earn any points whatsoever, you've got to participate 6 or 7 days, all right? And you've got to tweet 3 or more times, 6 or 7 days, okay? Now, Yeah, that's still counting, but if you look at the previous video, counting tweets has gone way down, okay? And it doesn't have to be original content or retweeting, right? You could just be talking to somebody, right? As long as you're on Twitter and you're engaging and you're producing a tweet, that counts. So if you go on for 6 days and you do 3 tweets of any kind, you're gonna get 1,000 points. That's it, period. Okay. Which isn't a lot in my grading scale because you have to have 80,000 points to get an A. So very minimal. But what if you engage in a sustained and interactive participation for 6 or more days, then I'm going to give you 8,000 points. All right. So now you can get 9,000 points, right? So, but you got to hang in there for 6 or 7 days. I do give students 1 day off, right? I don't expect them to do it all 7 days. I could even see where it might be realistic to have cut this back to 5 days, right? I think that would be fine too. And then I define for them, well, what is sustained and interactive participation? What do I mean? And I tell them they have to do more than just post links or make statements. You can't just be, here's something I found, here's a retweet, here's what I think about the question. You should do that. You can do that. But you also have to talk to other people, okay? You have to ask questions, comment on what they're sharing. You have to be engaged in a discussion. Now, if you, although I'm seeing an error in this as I do this, right? If you participate in 6 or more days and you have 3 tweets and then you have, you do the sustained and interactive participation for 6 or more days, you get a total of 9,000 points. If you're doing both of those, then you get an additional 2,000. So you can walk away with 11,000 points. This says, I just cut and paste this from the directions. It says do all 3 of these things. There's really just 2 things to do here. So you can get 11,000 points just for doing this. All right. Now this is kind of subjective on my part in a way, right? Like I eyeball this, like I pull up students, I kind of look through what they're doing. It doesn't take as long as you would think it takes, and I do it at the end, okay? I don't go in every day and do this because some students will drop out, and if you drop out on day 2, then, you know, I don't need to be eyeballing you, the work that you did, right? You dropped out. So I do it at the end. Maybe takes half an hour, right, to get my head around how students participated and assign grades. And what I found is that students that participated all 6 days, 6 or 7 days, right, they got these points, okay? Nobody participated for 6 days and didn't do these things, all right? People that didn't get the points didn't participate, or they did it for 2 days and decided this isn't for me and they quit, and that's fine. This wasn't required. So, and I do want to stress that. The Twitter chat's not required. I don't require my students to get on Twitter. I offer it up as one way to engage in the class. There are other ways to engage in the class so they can get points. Some people come in and try out Twitter and they don't like it. It doesn't work for them. That's fine. Or some people just don't want to do it at all. That's fine. But some people do. So here's what I noticed about this. Of course, this is just an off-the-cuff analysis, but I still had about 50% of the students participate. I had about 50% participation in my first Twitter chat. I had it in this one as well. Generally speaking, it's the same students as before because I had a core group of students that were engaged with Twitter and used it throughout the whole semester in ways that I had presented to them in class to use it for. So those are typically the ones that are participating here. The majority of the students that did this did it the whole time, okay? I had maybe 1 or 2 students drop out, but most of them, they did it all the way through. And discussions started to take place. I mean, this worked so much better than just saying, come in and tweet this many times over this many days, right? By privileging the discussion aspect and saying, I'm going to give you points because you had discussions, you didn't just come in and post a bunch of tweets and leave, then the discussion happened, right? And I had no problems with that. All right, so if you've got questions about how I've used Twitter, things that I have found in using Twitter in my classroom, you can contact me, leahall39@gmail.com. And I've got a exciting blog, Confessions of a Bored Academic, leahall.wordpress.com, where I talk about teaching in higher education in more detail. So I hope to see you over there as well.